How's everything else like, given the situation that we are?
Overall, good. I think for Highland as a company, continuing to do very well. The benefit of the industry that we're in and the technology that we develop is really suited to help businesses accomplish things that they needed to accomplish during this whole crisis, which has been great. So certainly customers buying cycles have slowed down in certain areas, but some of them were actually accelerated because of the need of technology gaps that needed to be filled in order to better enable remote workforces and better communication from a remote field. So far this year, we're keeping on pace for our revenue targets. We're continuing to see growth, which has been exciting because it was kind of a big unknown when this first started. Obviously, we still have the entire second half of the year to go, so we'll see how things shake out in the third quarter here coming up. But from a company perspective, things are still moving along. It's been an adaptation. We've had to make some adjustments for those of us who are used to being in the office all day long. But Highland has had probably about a third of its workforce has been remote for on a permanent basis. So it wasn't a huge adjustment. We had to maybe up some licenses to support a larger remote workforce, but as a whole, we were able to make that transition fairly smoothly. So it's been more on the personal level, I think, just from a manager perspective, being able to ensure that employees still stay motivated and are still supported. And, for me, who was managing out of the office, learning how to, better support and manage a team in a fully remote methodology. Took a little bit of adjustment, but we're all getting along fine. I'm happy with it so far.
And how do you see the mood of the employees, given the context of 100% remote now?
Yeah. It ebbs and it flows. It definitely comes in waves. I think when people feel like there is a lot to work on, they're doing fine. I think when they feel the business slow down, that's when they start to feel the effects of being remote. I can speak specifically for my team. My team is we're a very close-knit group as a whole. We've been together for a long time. We lean on each other a lot. And having that person-to-person interaction on a day-to-day basis is something that we've gotten used to. So I think for a lot of people, not having that, it does take an emotional toll for some people. Some people handle it better than others, but as a whole, I think the team has still continued to work very hard. And as positive as you can be given the state of everything, I think everybody's keeping a very positive outlook. Obviously, turning a corner here, hopefully on the pandemic and starting to see things start to slowly move back to some sense of normalcy is helping. Truthfully, the weather plays a big part of it too. Being in the Midwest, the pandemic hit right in the middle of March, which for us is still kind of right in the middle of winter. So it was a tough break to suddenly be working from home. It was cold outside. It was snowy. It was dreary. Now that we're in summertime, I think that's helping, encouraging people to get outside and make sure they're taking care of their mental health as well as their physical health, and ensuring that becomes part of the routine has all been part of this. But I think people are doing okay. I think obviously moving into, like I said, some sense of normalcy is helpful. Hopefully that will continue. And, we're all hoping that at some point here in the near future, we'll at least be seeing the inside walls of the office again soon.
Okay. Good luck with that.
Yeah, thank you.
That's a good wish list.
Yeah, we're hopeful, but we're also realistic, right? I think for the most part, we're taking things as they come. We understand that change is pretty much a constant in our business, so we will adjust as we need to.
Right. One of the things that I noticed is when let's say when I used to commute to office and then and then I see this last 3 months. I'm not commuting much, but what I found is like I start very early and I finish very late. And
Yeah.
most of the time I'm on the meetings or talking to entrepreneurs or someone, and that takes a lot of time. And I wonder if that's the same thing for you.
When you're in the office?
I know, compared to when you are in the office versus when you are working completely from home.
It is true. Yeah, we do spend a lot of time on Zoom meetings. The Zoom fatigue is a real thing.
Yeah.
And we joke about it, but what used to be a simple flyby office visit, stop over to somebody's desk to chit chat for a few minutes or to check in on a business related issue, regardless, easy to do in the office, that actually has to be a scheduled meeting or has to be a drop-in phone call now. So it does take up a lot of your time. I think I think the benefit, or I guess a positive outcome though, I think people are getting used to recognizing what meetings they need to be a part of and which ones they maybe don't. I think we all get used to just being accepting of meetings that we get asked to be a part of, and sometimes we don't need to, and it's okay to say no. And I think having to manage this schedule where all your meetings happen remotely, it gives you a better sense of finding that balance and feeling comfortable with not accepting a meeting or asking for a new time. I think people have gotten better at doing that. I think at the start of this thing, man, people's calendars were full from 7 in the morning until 6 at night. And
Yeah.
I think everybody's gotten better to try and keep everything within I'd say typical workday. I don't think there is necessarily a typical workday anymore, but between the 8 to 5 hours, and they're peppering in a little bit of personal time again to go exercise or work on some home projects in between, just to kind of keep a good work-life balance. So people are managing it, and then obviously as we start to get a handle on working remotely, that'll probably be the time that we all start heading back into the offices again. So it's like jet lag, right? When you fly somewhere, as soon as you adjust to the time zone, you got to turn around and go back to where you came from.
I wonder, if we will be too comfortable just working from home, and we may not like office anymore. So I'm just worried about that.
Well, we certainly aren't going to go back to what was normal before. I know from Highland's perspective, this is creating a mindset of change, and we are looking at how we're set up, how we're asking employees to work. We've proven that we can work as a fully remote company. I don't think that we necessarily have a desire to do that as a whole, but certainly being more flexible with people working, say, in the office, 2 or 3 days a week, and then working at home the rest of the week. I think that'll kind of be the new normal for us as well. So I think the days of, doing full-time in-office work is probably going to be less and less.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one thing that I didn't notice during this last 3 months is that we're buying a lot of things online, and then because it's available for us, and when you go to the store, there are a lot of challenges there. You don't want to go to the store and,
Sure.
expose yourself, right? And in the same context, I was thinking about banks, right? And I'm thinking, okay, what if I want to buy a house, right? And if I want to buy a house, there's a lot of challenge. There's a lot of regulations issues, and of course the traditional banking system is not that advanced enough for us to handle a lot of requests or even get our loan approval. I mean, in the same context, I was kind of thinking, what do you think about this traditional banking system? Why are they sort of lagging behind?
It's a couple of things. I think obviously the path to modernization, or let's use the buzzword of digital transformation. The path to get there is certainly expensive, and there's a lot of technologies to consider when you're thinking about moving to a more digital, remote, mobile capable institution, and it takes time. And I think there's different factors that play based on the size of the institution, right? For the small to mid-sized banks, it may be the money factor, it may be the outlay of capital that's required to get to that point. And I think for the bigger banks, it's just the change management process. You know, they have the money, but in order for them to make broad sweeping changes of that magnitude, that's a multi-year undertaking, and that takes not only money, it takes people resources, it takes time resources. So I think the combination of those two, along with the, you know, banks are just, or financial institutions in general, they're just very security minded, and they're very security focused, and they analyze, you know, every possible technology that they are considering down to the minutest of details, because when you're dealing with people's finances and you know, private information, you've really got to have things buttoned up. So it's just such a huge consideration and a huge process. And I think for those reasons, financial institutions have been lagging in the digital transformation landscape. But I think we're starting to see that accelerate in bits and pieces. And I think it's going to move even faster post-COVID, because I think this particular year and this particular crisis has exposed a lot of, as I mentioned, you know, technology gaps, and where you were not technologically advanced as an institution, they're seeing a need to be, and a need to get there very quickly, because all of the concerns around revenue and all of the concerns around security, all the concerns around the time that it takes to do it, while all still valid, if it's having a fundamental impact on customer expectations and the customer experience, they're going to have a hard time hanging on to those customers. And that's the competitive edge that, you know, the more technologically savvy institutions are going to see, is they're going to acquire customers that walk away from these big legacy institutions who haven't adapted quick enough.
Yeah, I mean, because as a consumer, I want everything, you know, right away, right? I don't have patience, and pretty much all of us, like we've gotten into that mode that we don't want to wait for anything, right? And that has been the pattern. And then perhaps one of the things that you mentioned, I would like to add there, is a mindset that I want to sort of, you know, add there. It's like maybe there's no willingness to change from the leadership perspective in the traditional organizations. What do you think on that?
It depends on the leadership, at least in my experience, and I would probably say this is more my opinion formulated from my experience, but it truly does depend on the leadership. It depends on how long that leadership has been there, what legacy they came from. There is a mindset out there that this is, you know, the old school way that this bank or this financial institution has always operated, and we've been successful, and we don't see a need to change. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. You see some of the more, I don't want to make it, I don't think it's necessarily an age thing, but some of the younger, more, I guess, more modern C-level or executive level people that have moved into those positions of leadership are more willing to take chances and take risks that some of the more longstanding executives are not. So I think it's definitely not necessarily even restricted to the size of the institution. I think it is oftentimes the executive leadership can be a barrier based on their overall experience in the market. And for those that have just been around a really long time, they're hard to get unstuck from their past and the ways that they've done things in the past.
And talking about the new startups, right? You know, you think about new startups, they have all the attributes to become successful, or at least on papers, it looks very promising, right?
Sure.
And there are quite a few, you know, in the European region, we have pretty much, you know, big names like Revolut, and yeah. when I look at those companies and the kind of offerings that they are making, and it almost feels like, you know, they read our mind, right? Mm-hmm. It almost feels like, oh, I need that, I also need that, right? So and then it almost feels like, oh, I need everything, and then when I go to my bank, I have to stand on the queue and then get my stuff done, and then that gives me a little bit of hope when I look on the other side.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head, is that what the startups and the fintechs are doing really well is listening and responding to consumer needs. I think overall in the industry, I think the primary driver of every change, regardless of whether you're a big bank or a small bank or anything in between, the primary driver is the customer experience. I think everybody has finally shifted their focus from, internal process automation and efficiency, while still important. The primary driver is this making the experience better for our customers, and everybody's in that mindset, but the ability to respond in a nimble fashion is really where the startups are taking leaps and bounds, and able to take market share from some of the other vendors out there and get their names into some very big places, because they're not going after necessarily big platform plays. They're not trying to be the monster core systems, like the Fiservs and the Temenos. They don't want that business, but what they are taking is the pieces that matter to the customers and to the consumers. So as you said, they listen to what you and I want when we go to a branch or when we go online, and they know what that experience is. When I apply for a loan, how fast do I want that response, that turnaround, that decision? And they're putting out technology that meets the need and addresses the call. And if banks are not quick to understand and respond, accordingly, these are the technologies that are going to take over the landscape, and are doing so right now, and they're going to continue to do so. They're going to continue to take market share because they are listening to the customer first and foremost.
The reason why I sort of brought this topic out is because I'm imagining the time when we didn't have internet, right? And I'm kind of thinking, like, at that point in time, we used to go to the bank and then wait on the teller, and then the teller used to give us cash. So that was the time. And then over time, when we had internet, we started to do a lot of things over the internet. But in principle, they just did the iterations on just complementing those services that they used to do in, let's say, without internet. And
Right.
that didn't change. That fundamentally didn't change. And there's no disruptions, or there's nothing new there. It was just a complementary services. So as a result, like the new startups there who are changing the way money is handled, it has really changed everything now.
Agreed. You're absolutely right. I mean, banking is banking and will always be banking, right? You're still dealing with people's money, and you're still dealing with the transactional side of things, and those transactions occur. The start and the finish of those transactions looks exactly the same as it did 10, 20, 30 years ago. You need cash, you request cash, you get cash. It's just what happens in between that has really changed and been streamlined, and that's what the customer cares about, is how easy is this for me to accomplish pretty much the same stuff, right? Yeah. The technology in between is what's all been rattled and changed and been disrupted in a good way, by these startups, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing for the industry. It's a good thing for the consumers, because the progress has allowed more transparency. It's allowed more efficiency. The customer demand has driven everything that the industry is today, and is continuing to drive change on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis.
There are buzzwords around, let's say, banking 4.0, and then there's also the whole thing now about the blockchain and the cryptocurrencies and all that. How excited are you with this new development around the new currencies coming up?
That's a good way to phrase that question. For me personally,
yeah,
it's exciting. It's exciting to watch. It's exciting to see where the blockchain and where cryptocurrency and where everything that surrounds this technology is headed. I think it's going to be a massive part of the banking system, going forward. I think when you're talking about efficient ways to make exchanges and do so in a secure, decentralized manner, I think that addresses so many things that the industry needs from both a regulatory standpoint, as well as, again, going back to just transparency, and it checks a lot of the boxes. The cautious side of me is just saying, take a cautious approach, and let's see what bubbles up to the top as the kind of the market leaders in this space, and what are the applications, where are the first major applications for this? Because I think a lot of things are still being tested. I think obviously the payments market, the payments industry is going to be one of the first to really push the needle when it comes to blockchain and crypto. But there's a ton of application for it in the financial services landscape overall, on the lending side, from credentialing for, internal certifications. There's all kinds of application to do that through the blockchain. So, I mean, you could go through a dozen different use cases in no time and figure out places that blockchain will play a major role within the next several years. I think again, because the financial services industry is so security minded and security focused, I think it'll take some time to really get the impact that it will have, but it will have an impact, and it will be, I believe, within the next, I would say, 5 years conservatively, and probably sooner.
Even I'm let's say moderately, skeptic, not very skeptic, but at the same time moderately skeptic. Let's say more of a 51% on the positive side, because of the technology itself. I believe that this kind of technology will help us moving forward, and there's a lot of applications, like you said, different use cases. One of the interesting case studies that I can tell you is, like, one of the companies is using the blockchain technology in the supply chain spectrum, and
Sure.
but it's for gas and chemicals, right?
Yep.
So they actually understand the chemical composition. They would sort of trace the manufacturing process from where it was created to where it was let's say delivered. So they're able to literally trace those things and then verify the integrity of those let's say matter or gas. So they are able to do that. So that's kind of interesting, and excited about the currency as well, but then also the other side of its application. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the use case that you just outlined, if you take the core principles of the traceability, the verifiability of that transaction from distributor to delivery, right, of gas, that use case really can be applied to not just gas and oil, not just banking. I mean, every industry has a supply chain, and that alone could be a major factor for business going forward. So I think, much like you, I'm hopeful that, well, I don't know if I think hopeful is the right word. I am hopeful that it does become something as significant as what it is slated to be. But I think, much like you, I wouldn't say I'm skeptical, but I'm a very patient watcher. I'm not going to be the first on the bandwagon, but I will continue to watch with a very interested and keen eye, and be excited about the things that come to fruition. And when it hits the banking world in full stride, I think it can bring some change in a very positive way.
We want change, and I guess this technology definitely has those let's say promise. So hopefully we are able to see that change. I'm also quite excited about using robots and artificial intelligence, and I don't know how skeptical are you with this part of the technology?
I would say skeptical, not skeptical from the standpoint of can it work and can it bring efficiency. I think it's possible. I'm skeptical on what it's been predicted to do thus far and what it's actually delivered. I think a lot of banks specifically have jumped on I'm going to use RPA bandwagon specifically. Yep. A lot of banks have made some major investments in RPA technologies, and they've implemented, however many thousands of millions of bots to do any number of things. I don't know that they've necessarily seen the return that they've anticipated just yet. And I'm just saying this as a whole. I'm sure there are certainly, some significant exceptions to what I'm saying here, but I think we're still early in the life here as well. So I'm not a skeptic of what I think is possible. But I think just the early ROI story is yet to really be recognized across the industry as a whole. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but I would say I'm probably falling right now to that 51, 52% that you just mentioned. I think it's out there, and I think that there is certainly more market share and more capabilities that automation vendors who do develop RPA, AI, machine learning, intuitive cognitive technologies, they're going to do well if they do it right. And there is all kinds of opportunity here. I think the ROI will soon follow. I just think we're still early in the life cycle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And one of your Democratic candidate, Andrew Young, was pretty much, I think it was a skeptic, right? So he was talking about the automation is taking over and the job market and so forth. I don't know. I think he was a skeptic.
Everybody's got their theories for sure, but no. And it's one thing. This is just my humble opinion, right? You can read a publication that says one thing and throws all kinds of statistics out that validate that opinion, and then you can read something that states total opposite and has statistics to prove that as well. So it really just comes down to, what do you see in practice? What are you seeing out there in practice? What are your customers doing as I'm going out and visiting them? Where am I seeing success and where am I not? So that's where I think my opinions are formulated, is just based on what I'm seeing within my own customer base and, what they're reporting back to me as far as their successes and failures with adopting these new technologies. I'm not looking at reports and I'm not reading other stories to formulate my thoughts on this. I'm just looking at real life application.
Mm-hmm. So talking about this, your customers and specifically for Highland, what kind of challenges that you're solving at the moment?
Oh boy, that's a broad question.
Take your time. I can listen.
No, it's fine. And like I said, I say it's a broad question because our technology stack has broadened so much over the last couple of years through a number of different acquisitions and technologies that we continue to develop. So the needs that we meet are very widespread. At the core of what we do is automation, internal automation, right? Any of the processes and procedures that are very time intensive or people intensive or are just very costly because of those factors. Our technology is all about taking documents and data that are related to business processes and working through a business process in a more efficient fashion. So workflows and work processes get more streamlined, which again does help to better enable remote employee management and remote work distribution. So that's kind of the core of what we do. Now when organizations are looking for more of the intuitive technologies that's specific to documents and data, things like OCR, intelligent character recognition, automated data extraction, to help aid in some of those business processes. We've got technologies, capture solutions that do that very well. More recently, and I think one of the things that was really exposed through the COVID pandemic is the need for institutions to be able to have a technology at their fingertips where they can quickly create and deploy new solutions on their own, right? There's a lot of technologies out there that are kind of like a developer's toolbox, and you really have to apply a lot of coding, programming, scripting to create a solution to meet a need very quickly. And what a lot of companies are in need of right now are these rapid application developed solutions where they can use configurable screens, intuitive wizards to stand up new new applications to meet a need. So for example, during the COVID crisis, right at the beginning of it, a lot of lenders wanted to take advantage of the small business, the SBA loan program that we issued here in the States. And because of that, banks were seeing a massive influx of loan applications come in, and they didn't have any real good checks and balances or any way to process the high volumes, and also to meet all the compliance requirements to assure that they were collecting all the documentation and things like that. So they were looking to vendors who could stand up an application for them in a very quick manner to meet these very specific needs. So I think the concept of having very case-driven software that allows them to build out technological answers to problems that they're seeing in a very quick manner, that's been a huge relief for a lot of customers that are using our applications, because we have a very robust workflow and case management side to what we offer. So those are just kind of a handful of what we're addressing right now in the market. But again, if you had 3 or 4 hours, we could go through many more scenarios of what the typical use cases look like. But we tend to touch the financial institutions at the enterprise level. So there's automation that happens on the front lines with the teller transactions, the loan transactions. There's automation that happens in the back office in HR departments and accounts payable and contracts management and vendor management. And the software solutions that we deploy are primed to really address all of that.
I spoke to one of the executive recently. They are into this AI space where they're more of a chatbot, but more on the using let's say, the artificial intelligence to analyze the question the customer is asking and so forth. So
sure.
He explained about his applications and how it is helping the people to reduce the telephone cost. At this time, people are all calling for claims and so forth.
Yeah.
and of course, the organizer has to pay for that, right? So they have to pay those let's say, people on this recipient and to receive the call, talk to the person, and sometimes the questions are pretty easy.
Yep.
And it might be straightforward, and they might save money using those technologies. So
yeah, 100%. The call center automation, I think, is probably what you're referring to.
Yeah.
Has been an absolute necessity, and I think that's when we talk about the cautious optimism and the immediate applications for robotics, I think that call centers are a huge use case for that, because you're either going to invest in the technology to help handle those influx of calls, or you have to go hire people, which is infinitely more expensive, and people are going to look to technology to do that. So I think I actually may have even read that particular article that you wrote, because you said it was an insurance company, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
For the insurance company.
So yeah, I read that. And it's spot on. We, at Highland, we are not developing the robotics or the intelligence behind that, but we are working to integrate and complement a lot of these technologies that are being used in call centers and all other types of applications. So on the RPA front, on the AI front, there are some things that we're doing from that standpoint, but it's not the core of what we do. And we're going to look to really partner with some of the market leaders in those spaces rather than try and be all things to all people. But in doing so, we've been able to develop some great relationships, and we recognize that there are companies out there that they do it a lot better than we do when it comes to those kind of things. So we're not selling any chat bots these days, but the follow-ons from those customer call-ins and the needs to collect documentation that are originated from those customer interactions, that's where all those technologies can start to sync together and work for the benefit of the customer transaction.
How excited are you with decentralized finance?
I'll be honest with you, and this is just me personally. I don't know that I've really developed a strong opinion on it yet. I've looked. There's pros and cons, and I can't say that I've gotten excited one way or the other. Again, I kind of resolve to the same answer that I gave before. I'm kind of just taking a cautiously optimistic, kind of a wait and see approach. But the decentralized finance concept and conversation, I haven't dug deep enough into to really be dangerous about it or to formulate a strong opinion. So I'm kind of just watching to see what happens. And I can't say that I'm excited one way or the other yet. So still sitting in the middle, waiting to see who pushes me to one side or the other.
Yeah.
What are your
Indeed.
thoughts? I'm curious what your thoughts, because I know you dig into this quite a bit in a lot of the articles, and this is the core of the stuff that you write about. I'm curious what
Yes.
your thoughts are.
I think you, if you look at the concept of decentralized finance, I think it's interesting,
Sure.
and there are many different applications to that, and I'm definitely, let's say, curious about the evolution of it, and especially in the European region. We're quite heavily investing in blockchain and all those principles. And I'm really, really looking forward to these practical applications. So far, it's on the theoretical side. So far, we've heard of bits and pieces of how it's going to work. But I would like to see it being a day-to-day sort of, operations where we get to experience, like, what are the benefits it adds to the consumer at the end of the day. So I'm from a consumer perspective, I'm excited. At the same time, from a curiosity standpoint, I'm looking forward to it. So that's what I'm not skeptical on this one. Let's put it this way.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fair. And
Yeah.
to your credit, like I said, you've probably lived and breathed it a little bit more heavily than I have on a day-to-day basis. So I
Yeah.
definitely value that opinion.
No, indeed. Let's say, I'm curious. I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs and who are tech savvy, and then ask them those questions, and they answer me, and I get those answers, right? So and that's how I learn about new things. And there are so many challenges around those implementations, and yet, we are all curious,
Yeah.
and we are aware that it's not going to be implemented, like, let's say, a year or two. It might take a few years from now, but still, it's an interesting area to look at.
Yeah, I think with all of this, Pramod, if we were having this conversation, 3 years from now, this conversation would look and feel very, very different, because all these things that we're kind of sitting and waiting to see what happen, some are going to be, I think, a resounding success, and others, I think, are going to have their challenges and may continue to be challenged for a while. And it'll just be interesting to see, what the landscape looks like from a technology standpoint a few years from now.
I'm more, let's say, curious about when we would sort of go into that cashless society 100%, right? So that's where I'm sort of want to see myself in, let's say, a few years from now. At least we don't have to use cash anymore. That's a
Yeah.
first step, I would say, towards being 100% digital. And then going forward, of course, the likes of cryptocurrencies would perhaps be a catalyst in order to get there. So
Yeah.
that's what I think is going to be the first step.
Well, and I see, I think we're all taking, as consumers, we're all taking our own, call them baby steps. Some baby steps are bigger than others, but, some of us don't carry cash anymore. Some still do. Some of us are jumping on the cryptocurrency bandwagon and making investments here and there, and some people aren't. And it just depends. Yeah, it's all just dependent on, a risk tolerance and how much you're willing to adjust to the changes that are on the horizon.
No, I'm also one of those, let's say, edgy kind of person, like, who likes to try out and then like, don't even think about it. Like, oh shit,
Yep.
what did I do it, right? I don't even think about it. And I also was one of those person in that bandwagon. Like, I did invest in Bitcoin and
Yeah.
Ethereum, and I hope to, I hope I get my return back, so.
Yeah, no, I'm very much the same way. I was late. I was late to the cryptocurrency game as a whole, but
Yeah,
I've made my investments and taken some lumps along the way. Have invested at some good times too. So yeah, it's been a balance. But I'm very much like you. I don't mind taking the risk. I think the reward on the back end, I think is still there to be recognized. So on a personal level, I'm looking forward to that day.
yeah, yeah. So, what keeps you awake at night? Looking at all this new innovations going forward. What is the one technology that you are really curious about?
From a I think that's more being driven by where Highland is going as a company. That's probably what dominates the forefront of my thinking as far as technologies go. But we're seeing a massive trend to cloud computing, cloud first technologies, right? Everybody, especially in the financial services world these days, there is a ton of interest in moving to hosted solutions, cloud-based solutions, platforms as a service. And that is where Highland is going on a path to modernization as well. We're becoming very much more of a cloud-first, cloud-focused software as a service provider. And those are the kinds of things that I have to think about, because it definitely impacts not only what we're doing today as a company, but it impacts the 15,000 plus customers that currently have our solutions, and making sure that we're guiding them on a path to success as we transform our business, as we transform our technology. So that tends to be very dominating in my thoughts these days. It's less about what I personally get excited about. It's really been largely, where is Highland going, who's going to be impacted by it, and how do we make this transition successful, both internally at the company level and externally for our customers.
So, what sort of new challenges that Highland is trying to solve now? What would they have already been into the cloud space and so forth, but still there might be something that you still want to challenge yourself to.
Well, the thing I love about Highland, I think they're very forward thinking. So while we do obviously try and balance the risk reward conversation, they're always looking to bring on new challenges, to try and address new challenges. So for us right now, it is it's trying to figure out what's on the tail end of this pandemic, and how does the world look after this is all said and done. I mean, we've essentially, as a globe, we've gone through probably 10 years of changes compacted down to a 4 or 5 month window right now. And, that'll play itself out here over the next several months, the next year or so. And it's really trying to figure out and adapt to what I don't want to continue to use the buzzwords of 2020, but what the new normal is going to look like, right? Because we have to figure that out, because we serve all industries. We're not just financial services. We are government. We are commercial. We are oil and gas. We are higher education. We serve healthcare. We have to think about where these industries are going to be on the tail end of this, and what do the changes look like. And we've got to figure that out ahead of time, because our customers are going to be relying on us to continue to deliver solutions, but it's going to look totally different than what it was before. So I think for Highland, that's the biggest challenge, is being forward thinking enough to be able to get ahead of the curve, and recognize where our customers are going to be in the next 6 months to a year to 3 years, in order to keep effectively partnering with them.
So you mentioned quite interesting point there as far as your adaptability is concerned. And how do you build this support system which would allow you to constantly evolve and constantly adapt to the new changes that's happening around?
We do a really good job, honestly, of listening to our customers. Our customers tend to drive most of the changes that happen within the technology stack. We've got user groups that we stay in very constant communication with. We've got forums where our customers can communicate with us. We've got communities for our partners who are out there selling our technologies, and communication methods for them to come together with us in settings to offer up new ideas, to offer up changes, enhancements, things that have to happen with the software, with the company. We're always listening, and I think that's the one thing that Highland does really, really well is they have their ear to the they have their ear to the ground, and they're always listening to what their customers have to say, and the customers really are the ones that are letting us know what's on the horizon, and then we react appropriately.
Customer centricity, is something that every companies, or at least the companies that are at the cutting edge, are at least looking forward to, and they're listening to customers. And whenever they listen to the customer and adapt their whole service delivery system, then of course there's a better chances that the company becomes successful. So and the companies that are not doing that in that regard, then perhaps they will disappear.
Couldn't agree with you more. I think those would be the first ones that not only they see a hit to their revenue stream, but eventually they'll be the ones that'll just fall too far behind to be able to catch up. If you're not listening to your customers, you're not keeping yourself relevant. If you ever, this is for you personally, if you ever find yourself over in the U.S. and you're in Westlake, Ohio, and stop by our offices, we operate by 6 core principles that are printed and hanging on our walls when you first walk in the building. And the very first one is that the customers are the lifeline. They're the blood of our business. Our customers are our partners, and if we don't operate by that day to day, we're going to become irrelevant. And for since 1991, so where are we at? 29 years now, Highland has operated with that customer first mindset, and I think it's boded well for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Indeed. You said you are in Ohio?
We are Westlake, Ohio, which is 15 miles straight west of Cleveland.
Okay. I was there, I think, in Akron.
Oh yeah, you were a little bit south.
Yeah. I was there like in 2016 or something. So.
Now I got to ask, what took you to Akron, Ohio?
No. I'm a consultant as well, and I'm a coach and a consultant, and
very cool.
Yeah. So yeah, I was there for an assignment there in a company that are primarily based in Atlanta, but then they also have offices there. So that's one of the reasons why I was there, more on the training side, So I was helping them.
Well, I'll extend that offer. If you're ever back anywhere in or around the Cleveland area, reach out to myself and Megan and anybody else that you come in contact with here at Highland, and come visit us for a day. It's an impressive, I'd say, facility, but it's actually 3 buildings. We have a little mini campus. The company's grown so rapidly over the last few years, so we're a little bit spread out, but it's a great place to stop in, and the culture is awesome. You wouldn't be disappointed. So the open invitation anytime you come back.
Thank you so much. The next time I definitely have to make a tour to different places in the U.S.
Yeah, yes. For sure. There's a lot of places to choose from, though, and I can totally understand why Cleveland, Ohio would not necessarily be at the top of that list.
No. I was in Akron. Come on, it was like the 10 people live there, right? So
right. That is very true. Very true.
But I enjoyed, right? So that's all counts, right? So
absolutely. It's always fun, to go. I love travel. It's always fun to go to new places. It doesn't even have to be the biggest, flashiest city. I love seeing, the small towns and everything in between. So if you enjoy it and take it for what it's worth, I think any place can be entertaining. Any place can be beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, Stephen, thank you so much for your time on this Wednesday afternoon for you, and almost night for us.
Yeah.
It was a very wonderful and pleasant conversation with you. I get to learn a lot of things from your perspective as well.
Well, I do too. I listen. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and meet you, and certainly, anytime that I get a chance to chat with somebody who is knowledgeable of the space is always a pleasure in my mind. So I think it was time well spent, and I certainly hope you